C5 Insight is a Microsoft partner that plans, builds, and supports solutions in Dynamics 365, Teams, SharePoint, and the Power Platform. Contact us to modernize your business today.
Good afternoon or morning or evening or whatever time it is, wherever you happen to be taking in this session. Today we're going to be talking about a topic, 7 habits of CRM success or getting started or restarted with a customer relationship management project. We've been in this business for over 20 years, and I can tell you most of the clients that come to us are unfortunately in the restarted mode after something didn't work the way they expected. And I don't necessarily mean technology, just adoption, governance, all those kinds of things. And they need help getting back on track. So we have tried to consolidate what we have learned over our history into the top 7 of a long list of things that you should make sure you have in place to be successful in any kind of customer relationship management project. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about why this is such an important topic. If you're like most businesses, trying to keep up with customers, coworkers, partners, leaders, all those apps and channels required to keep up with them, it starts to seem complex, right? Unless you're a very small, early stage business, you can rapidly find yourself in something that feels like this picture, right? All the communications and knowledge and processes and systems you have to use, it just can feel overwhelming. The amount of tribal knowledge that has to be shared just for someone to plug in and become a productive member of your organization can be overwhelming. So what do most companies do? Something like this, right? We're a Microsoft shop, so I'm going to use Microsoft as an example, but this is really about anything. We used to be a Salesforce.com shop too. We found the same thing there. They go get a demo and they invest in technology to fix the problem, right? You have this vision that, Dynamics 365, SharePoint, Teams, maybe some of the new things like Viva and AI, these will help solve problems for you, right? You'll have a fewer number of applications to use for people to get their jobs done, and it will simplify things. But what happens instead oftentimes looks a lot like this. It's almost back to the first diagram I gave you, but it's actually worse. This was really driven home to us years ago when we were doing a recovery project with a client, and someone said, look, I love our company, I love our leadership team, but I felt like every day we're strapping on a pack and taking a mountain for leadership, right? Go take that hill for us. And one day someone from leadership came in with a rock and had CRM in it, and they put it in our backpack and said, this should help. But they didn't take anything out of our backpack. We were still doing all the same things we were before. We were just taking another new rock up to the top of the hill. And I've heard versions of that play out with all of these applications. It's just more stuff until we figure out some way of rationalizing this and getting it all to work together. And the statistics are that about 70% of these projects struggle or outright fail. So if you're feeling some of this, you're not alone. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what do you do to do it right in the first place, or if you're already there struggling, what kinds of things can you start to put in place to get back on track? My name is Jeff Abels. I run a company called C5 Insight, and I'm having trouble with my headset today. And this is what we do. We are a Microsoft partner. We help our clients become more customer and employee engaged. In fact, our mission is to help companies become powered by luck. Listen, understand, connect, and know human beings better than ever before so they can run more productive businesses. I geek out on this stuff. I've helped to write some books on the topic. On the right-hand side, there's my why. There's my little family with 3 generations of my wife and I, our daughters, their husbands, and our 2 grandkids who we all love spending time with together. And there's our little empty nest doggy that keeps us company, Verdi. Okay, so let's dive into the content. Habits of CRM success. Now, you're going to see on these pages little orange flyouts. In fact, you already saw one a few pages ago about a study called CPR for CRM we did a number of years ago. There's a bunch of other ones available to you as well. I won't have time to share a lot of information on those. In fact, I'm just scratching the surface with these 7 things. So I'm giving you a lot of other resources you can go and use to dive deeper into these topics, particularly if there's somewhere you feel like, hey, we're not good there, we need to do better. If you want those, you'll get my email address at the end of this. I'll give you the PDF. All the links will be hot and you can click on them. Okay, let's dive in. So the very first thing is planning. Right? And maybe that should seem obvious, but we run into a lot of organizations who feel like they got the demo, and if we just install this thing, it will do what we need for it to do. And then they find out it doesn't, right? They almost think like CRM or the other tools they get come with a GPS, right? Like, oh, I'll just do what this thing tells me to do, and I'll do sales, marketing, customer service better as a result. But it just doesn't work that way. So there's a specific planning approach in cadence to be successful with CRM projects. Having done this so many years in so many different ways, we have gradually fine-tuned our process to focus on this one method that works best. So let's talk about that at least at a high level. The first thing to understand that's the rationale behind this method, which is something that I share in almost every presentation I do nowadays, is this finding from Harvard Business Review. And what this essentially says is it's not about giving your people technology so that your frontline people can do their jobs better. Is that part of it? Sure. But the part that most businesses miss is it's actually about giving your leaders and managers technology so they can do their jobs better. A lot of companies never lay a hold of that. Does that matter? According to Harvard Business Review, the difference between organizations where leaders and managers use tools like Dynamics to do their jobs better and those that don't is 10%. 10% better overall revenue growth year over year. That adds up and compounds very quickly. So what did Harvard Review say about that? How do these companies that have digital managers and digital leaders, these 19%, how did they get there? Well, what they said that they did that they all had in common was they go find a digital coach that creates a clear digital vision that results in that revenue growth we just talked about. That's what your roadmap is for. That's what your initial plan is for. What is your digital vision? And do you have the right people working with you to create that vision? So that's what I want to talk in this section about a little bit more is what is a digital vision? What is a roadmap, an annual planning? What do those look like? And notice I put two things in here. There's roadmap, but there's annual planning. Because just like your business does an annual plan, when you're thinking about transforming your business through better digital technology around things like customer relationship management, it doesn't sit still, particularly in the early years. You need to come back and continue to refine the plan year over year and realign it with your business. Because what's the most important thing? What's the most important asset your business has? It's probably your customers, and they're changing fast, and you need to keep up with those changes. So what's the methodology for building that? Well, we've kind of worked through a 4-step methodology that we find works really well for us and for the clients that we support. And that is start by collaborating. Start by pulling your team together and listening to them, right? How do you do your job right now? What are your pain points? Are we moving from an old system? What works well with that? What doesn't work well with that? What do we need to make sure that we do in the future? Then you begin to take all that raw material you've gathered by listening to them and you analyze it, right? You get your business analysis team looking at it saying, given all of this, what needs to be on a roadmap? Then you pull all the documentation together. Then you say, okay, we've looked at best practices from outside and inside, pain points and all that. Here's what we believe our process needs to look like. And lastly, you don't just take that and then say, great, let's implement it. You go into a process of continuously validating it. If you're really good, you're going to be 80 to 95% right with your initial plan. That still leaves a pretty enormous gap for the things you're going to miss, the things you're going to be wrong on. And a year later, you're probably going to discover new things you hadn't even imagined. So that ongoing validation process is really important. Now, if you've heard me talk before, this might sound familiar because that's really about deeply listening to your business and the people in it, understanding it, going beyond just hearing and actually understanding what's going on, building the plan and the process, creating the connections, knowing what the results are, because even if you're great, you're far from perfect. You need to continuously improve. So a few other practical tips along the journey to make that happen. First one is it can be really helpful to start with a visionary demo or what we call an art of the possible demo. Because oftentimes when you do the normal planning process, you go, oh, let's get our team in a room and let's talk to them about their processes today and what they want. Well, a team in a room may have no idea what the possibilities are for them. So they may be very deeply inside the box and might not have permission, might not know what their imagination can consider this new solution can do for them. So an art of the possible demo is this idea of saying, hey, let's go through this real quickly just to show you some things that people are doing out there that maybe we should avail ourselves of, right? Talking about all the latest things like AI, But we'll even talk about things that some of you might have heard, like standard operating procedures and managing your meetings better and better activity management and time tracking for your users of CRM and some things like that that are very often pain points because legacy systems are really bad at doing them. And you want to help people open their minds to, we can do this better, we can do this differently if we have a new toolbox that we're working with on it. So we do these. We've got a library of hundreds of videos we've done. If you've ever sat in on one of my sessions, you might have heard some of those that we've played back. These are some sample ones. So if you want this slide just to see, here's a couple of quick examples of sales, marketing, and service, and some of the related capabilities that are available to people in Dynamics 365. If you get the slide, you can click those little orange links. You can play little short video blurbs on those. I will warn you, these are a little out of context. You usually want these to be part of an overall cadence where you're explaining what the system does and all of that. But if you're just looking for some quick tips on what might I include in a demo, here's a couple of things you can think about. You can go check those out later, get the links from me, and play those videos back on your own. The planning process itself when you're running workshops, there's lots of different methods you can use. You can do these completely digitally. We often do that if we've got global teams who are distributed and you just can't get many people together in person anyway. There's great digital tools to do that. One of them is called Mural, which we use quite heavily. We've built out a ton of templates in Mural that we use to facilitate these meetings so we can rapidly stand them up and facilitate information gathering sessions. We prefer to do them in person. There's nothing like life on life, body language, keeping people's attention engaged when they're not sitting there solo in their home office answering their phone and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of benefits to being in person when you can do that. And there are great facilitation tools for that. You probably have seen things with the Post-its on the walls and those kinds of things. Essentially, what you want to do is figure out who is this important to, how do you prioritize those people, then how do you speak to those groups to understand their priorities? How do you set those priorities? How do you understand what their processes are? How do you understand the pain points for those processes? And how do you brainstorm solutions to those pain points? That's the super quick way of all the stuff you want to gather in those workshops. There's, of course, a lot more depth to it, but what you want is a process for gathering all that information. Now, what we say the output of that is the things you see on the right-hand side of this slide. We call that raw material. That's not, you're still listening here, right? You're not yet really deeply analyzing. So when we facilitate those sessions, we call it luck storming. We say, let's get all of that raw material. Let's put that into a document so we can reference it. Let's also do some benchmarking surveys and put that into a document so you can listen more broadly to the team, but also quantitatively. If you do benchmarking surveys right, you can actually predict the key drivers or obstacles to adoption by team, and you can plan for those accordingly. It's incredible what's possible these days, especially with some of the machine learning capabilities that are built into these surveying tools. You may need to do a health check. If you're someone who's on that recovery path and, hey, we need to kind of look at things a little more closely, then you might need to do a health check of your current system. Do you have outside research? It's helping you understand how your industry behaves and what the best practices are and what the ROI might be. And then, of course, once you're all done, you have a plan. That all gets put into the understanding and connection documents, right? So that's on the left-hand side of this page, where you then develop your roadmap with a lot of detail in it. You summarize it with a PowerPoint deck probably, so those who can't take the time to read through a document that might go dozens or even hundreds of pages long, they can get the highlights in PowerPoint format. But those become your core deliverables. Those become your plan. Now, what we suggest people do is start with a summary first. Don't build out the big detailed Word document because remember you have validation, right? You're not going to write this and go, here's what it is. You're going to say, we need to bounce this around a lot to make sure that we get this right. Because although we as your partner or even an internal group who's doing this for you, they may not understand the full context of what the users are trying to tell them. So summarize in PowerPoint very briefly first. Hey, here in general is what we're thinking. Here's how we think the phases will go. Not the detailed requirements, but at least kind of the big picture of what's going to happen when. Get buy-in on that and fine-tune it. So now when you create that detailed document, you don't have to go rewrite that detailed document, right? You've already got the high-level buy-in, and you might just need to do fine-tuning after that. And then you create the project plan. So notice, by the way, so far I haven't talked about project plan. A roadmap is very different from a project plan. And in fact, a good roadmap is not in and of itself a project plan. When I think project plan, I think, here's my phases and subphases and tasks and milestones and all of those kinds of things. I've got a pretty decent set of requirements by the time I'm writing a project plan. A roadmap isn't for that. You can have a high level, broad strokes understanding of requirements. You know what the list of projects probably looks like, and then you go create the project plan for the first phase, right? The first project in that roadmap that you just wrote. So be careful to understand the distinction between those two things and understand it up front, because you don't want your leadership team thinking, I bought a roadmap and as soon as we're done, we'll throw the switch and start executing the roadmap and we won't need to do any more planning. Not at all. You need to actually have that big picture plan, the vision first, then the individual project plans. And if you're doing this in any kind of modern format at all, your project plan include more detailed requirements gathering. Because remember, I just said the roadmap doesn't have the detailed requirements in it. It has the high level. You have a pretty good idea, maybe enough to kind of give a broad estimate for what that first project's going to be. But now that I start the first project, now I need to pull my users back in and say, now let's really get down to brass tacks that we need to talk tables and columns and views and a lot of other very specific things, maybe not in those terms because your users may not understand that, but you need to get the granular details so you can hand that off to the implementation team to do it exactly right. And there's a video there you can watch to some other project management approaches you can use to better pull that off. Okay, so that's the first one. I'm probably going to have spent more time on that one than any others, because if you disconnect now and that's all you got out of this session today, you're going to be way ahead of everybody else. As long as you understood the details of what I talked about, I can tell you we have rarely had to go in and do a rescue project for someone who did a good job with number one, right? That's the first and most important thing. The other things are also important, but not as critical as getting that first one right. And the next one is process design and automation. Again, gosh, this seems kind of obvious, but it's really not. I can't tell you how many people we've gone in to do either rescue work for or even a first-time project, and they just kind of think, well, our processes are so simple that they'll just move right in, or we don't even have a process, we just need a place to put data, or the system has a process, we just want to use the out-of-the-box process for the system. All of those are bad answers to the question of how are we going to do process automation within the solution. So the first thing to think about when you address this with your team is, do you need to answer this question? Because customer-facing people often aren't the kind of people that really appreciate process. And that's not to put them down. It's just that what they are great at, what's really important for them to be good at, is people, is relationships, is their phone mannerisms, is all those things that are really important to help humans connect to other humans. But what they need is the partnership of someone who's a little bit more task first, right? Someone who's not antisocial, but someone who thinks about process and task to get things done. So a lot of times these customer-facing people think, well, we don't need any more process. We're fine. This isn't working. You can't put it in a process. It's too random. It's too hard to predict what a customer is going to say and do. What I can tell you is customer-facing processes are different, but they're not non-existent. So if you've got traditional process people trying to do this, that also can be a challenge, because traditional process people, they think rigid, right? Like it's like finance processes, IT processes, HR compliance processes. Those are kind of like the boundaries are very clear. There's not a lot of flexibility, and that's important that they work that way. But people first processes, particularly for customers, they have to have a rigid core. There are certain things we have to do, but they need to be flexible around the edges, right? So, hey, there's certain things we always do every time. Sometimes our customers won't even understand or appreciate why we have to do things this way, but we know if we don't, we ultimately let the customer down. So it's really important that we go ahead and make sure we do things this way and then try to educate the customer to bring them along. So rigid at the core, flexible around the edges. That's what you want with your customer processes. So a few proof points for that. Looking across like the typical three categories of customer-facing responsibilities, you can see some metrics here around how do processes affect profit and other things around sales, marketing, and customer service. The evidence is clear, but I put this out there for you to say, at least as a starting point, this is a good set of metrics to begin to share with your team if they're pushing back on process. There are tons and tons and tons of other metrics. We've got a whole metrics ebook on digital workplace metrics that cover some of these and a lot of other things as well. So if you're having trouble convincing your leadership or your customer-facing people, some of this evidence can help, But as customer-facing people, the best evidence is often the case study because they're going to be more responsive to a story than they are to a fact. So bring both of those things together in your journey. Now, one of the things that I want to point out here is you think about these processes. An incredibly critical process for organizations implementing a CRM solution is the process of activity management. And it's a really hard one to get your hands around, right? You don't want to force activity management too much because everyone has their own way, right? I write things down in a legal pad. I put it all on a to-do list on my phone. I have it all over here in OneNote. I'm using To-Do or Planner or whatever those things are, right? But at the end of the day, if you don't adopt activity management within your CRM solution, you almost need to not even consider doing a CRM solution because there is so much power and effect built into doing activity management in a certain way. There's still a lot of flexibility for human differences as you do it, but you need that rigid core. You need some of that to be adopted by people in certain ways to get the full value out of your CRM solution. We did a whole separate webinar just on that not long ago. There's one that's recorded there that's actually pretty old. We haven't published the more recent version of that. We'll be doing that over the next couple of weeks, but you can get the link to the older one in the meantime. As you think about those processes, one of the things to consider, you've heard me say this before already, is use luck as part of your customer experience process definition. So what does luck mean in this context? It means at every step in the process. This isn't the process isn't luck. It's every stage of the process. How are we practicing luck? So what I mean by that is, let's say you've got a 3-stage customer service process, and you say we're going to do an intake, then we're going to do a triage, then we're going to do a resolution, and then we're going to check satisfaction. I just made that up. I don't know what the stages would be. That's 4 stages. I think I said 3. Each one of those stages, you look at it and go, how are we going to listen to the customer well during this stage? What kinds of information do we need to ask for? What are they going to share with us? And how are we going to capture that information? And now, how are we going to understand that? How are we going to go deeper than just, what's going on or what's the complaint, but to actually really understanding the underlying causality and even listening to the context of the customer, right? What's their emotional state and how are we going to respond to that? What decisions are we going to make? What are we going to help them to do? And then how do we then connect that, right? What's the process? What are the deliverables they expect and that we expect to get through this phase? And how will we know it's working? How will we continue to develop this phase, learn from it, and improve it again and again? So 4 Ds, if you will. What data do we capture? What decisions do we make? What deliverables do we bring to them? And how are we going to develop and improve the process? Just another way of saying, how are we going to listen, understand, connect, and know? So you think about your processes in CRM, lay them out, and then hold them up to luck as a matrix and go, are we really doing all 4 of these things really well at each stage of the process? All right, number 3 is this idea of integration, our systems working together. A number of years ago, we did a project for a distribution company, and they came to us, and after we'd worked with them for a while, they said, it's been 7 years that we've been trying to get this right. And now that we've finally integrated things so that our CRM users only have to go to one place to do the research and see what they need to do about the customer, we're finally getting the adoption traction that we wanted. Integration is an incredibly important part of a CRM project. It should always be on your roadmap. It does not necessarily need to be in phase 1 of the roadmap, but if you want to ultimately make your people more effective and productive and not have to use multiple systems to get the full version of the truth about the customer, you need to plan to have all the information about the customer in CRM so you can create that 360-degree view. One place I can go to learn everything I need to know about the customer. And little secret, you never finish this, right? You go from a 10-degree view to a 60-degree view to a 200-degree view, and then you're making small incremental changes. But I'm not sure I've ever worked with someone who's like, yes, we can see everything actually in one place, but you close that gap on an ongoing basis. So how do you do that? It starts at the earliest phases of road mapping. Understand the systems you have, understand the systems you're considering getting, and actually think about maybe in some cases it's better to get a solution that is fully integrated out of the box than it is to buy a bunch of disparate different solutions and you have to write integration code between them. I can tell you from experience, the integration part of a project is the most expensive part of a project, and it's the most fraught with potential error as a result. No matter what anyone else tells you, and believe me, we love doing integration projects because it's great revenue for us, right? We like being able to do that. But we also don't like consuming our client's budget when we could help them do something that's a much better use of their budget to actually create value. So think about what integration is already working out of the box and how can we leverage that to the greatest effect. And as we think about our system decisions, what systems will we invest in that are already integrated with each other? Which ones integrate a little more easily, so at least the integration is an easier lift? And which ones isn't really important from a business differentiation standpoint that we do have that are different? And let's go ahead and invest in integrating those. There will always be those to have happen because technology is a big part of what makes one business more competitively different than another. But don't look at every single thing as a decision to buy the absolute best of breed. You'll just spend money on things that don't work very well. This is another integration plan, is another example that came out of a roadmap that we did along with that other one you just saw. And here you can see some of the out-of-the-box integration, by the way. So here's Teams integration with CRM. So we work with a lot of companies who are like, oh, we bought this telephone system, and we bought it after we bought CRM. Now make it work with CRM. Well, did you know if you actually use the Teams telephony that can be built directly into Microsoft Teams, there's almost no integration required to make that happen? It can be a much easier lift for you, right, depending on the size organization you are. You can also think of other lighter lift things. In the lower right-hand corner is a screenshot from a client where we did integration between CRM and their ERP system. And in this particular case, we said, look, it's going to be a good enough lift for now to, instead of moving all that data over so that you can actually have the data in CRM, to just make it visible in CRM. So let's use kind of an iframe almost to bring your ERP data into CRM so your CRM users can see it without having to log into another system. Was that the long-term solution for them? No, absolutely not, because ultimately marketing wanted to produce segmentation and stuff like that around some of that data. Well, to be able to do that, that data actually needs to physically be in CRM so marketing can interrogate that. But it was in the roadmap to get to it later. They were able to kind of take a small step forward initially and then move further later on. So don't get perfectionistic to start with. Be reasonable in your roadmap and planning for integration.
Struggling to leverage Microsoft Enterprise solutions? At C5 Insight, we understand the intersection between technology, business, and people. Contact us to learn more.
The real term for this next one is master data management, but it's one of those terms that unless you're close to it all day long, you might think, well, what is that? So another way of saying it doesn't quite tell the whole story, but is data quality. And here's what I mean by that and why it's so important. You may be familiar with this already, but you know that the amount of data in corporate information systems is growing exponentially, right? So in 2006, the total amount of data available everywhere, right, not just any one company, but around the world, was 0.16 zettabytes. Well, by 2016, that was now already 4.4 zettabytes. And by 2025, just another year from now, that's going to be exponentially more than it was then. I saw a great statistic, I think it was around the year 2000, and it said something like 95% of all information that exists today did not exist at the time we landed a man on the moon, right? Like all that human history happened, and then about 20 years later, we had already multiplied all the information that was available by that much. And that was at the dawn of the internet before we had a lot of information. So there's a lot of information out there. Data management is important, but just managing the data is only part of the story because of all that data that's out there, 53 to 80% of it is bad data, according to corporate reporting. What that means, Roddy, means data that's redundant, there's duplication, outdated, this is no longer meaningful anymore, or there's something new that replaces it. Trivial, why are we keeping this? It's just cluttering things up and getting in people's way. Inaccurate, it's just wrong. Or incomplete, it's not completed yet. If you've been around CRM systems very long, you know this is probably the system that's the most guilty of Roddy, right? Accounting systems, other systems, they probably are pretty important that they're in compliance with having reasonably good quality data, or the invoice goes to the wrong person, the product doesn't get shipped correctly. Sales and marketing and customer service data, it is notoriously bad information. And if you're trying to do better decision making with bad data, your decisions are only going to be as good as the data that you're making them with. So here's one very quick thought on how to improve your master data management process. What's interesting is we came up with this diagram a number of years ago, but if you heard my coworker Malcolm present on customer insights data, a new module from Microsoft a couple of weeks ago, this is essentially the same process that they have in here. So how are you kind of taking your data in and making sure that it goes through a good user training, so users are doing their job at keeping it clean, but users alone will never be enough. How you also have administrative people who make sure they keep it clean, right? Whose job is it to keep information clean? And automation to make that happen. This was driven home to me a few years ago when we were talking to a law firm that we were consulting with, and someone said, data quality is everyone's job, right? And there's general agreement and everyone shook their heads. And one of the senior attorneys stood up and said, you know what? That makes a ton of sense. Just like keeping the office clean is everyone's job, right? So everyone takes turns emptying the waste baskets and mopping the floors and cleaning out the toilets and bathrooms. And I was like, no, nobody does that. And nobody wants to do that. And the senior attorney said, yeah, you're exactly right. Why would we make that our job when we've got a different job? Scrubbing this data, maybe there's a little bit we need to do, like keeping our own desktops clean in our offices. But everything else, we need to find someone who does this and does it well and keep ourselves unleashed to do what we do and what we do well, because there's a much better return on investment on that for us, right? So what is your overall process? What are the people, what are the processes, and what are the technologies involved that's going to get your data clean and keep it clean? The worst process is the one where you say, we let it get dirty, and every couple of years we do a spring cleaning. Do a spring cleaning, and when you do that, also figure out how you should never have to do another spring cleaning again. Think about your system of record. That's a big part of the conversation with master data management. You need to think about what system owns what piece of information. Might there be a few cases where there's a blend? The more of those you have, the more at risk you are. That's all I'll say. So the more you can make it clear that CRM owns the customer, accounting owns the transaction, all those kinds of decisions, those become really, really important. Doesn't mean that the data can't be visible in both places. It just means where is the authoritative source of truth going to be, and where is the bulk of data entry into that going to be. And by the way, when it comes to CRM and ERP, it's not black and white. We support some clients who say, look, we're going to do all of our quoting and order entry in our ERP system for some reasons. Others say, wait a minute, quoting and order entry, that's a very customer-facing task. We want the people who are talking to the customer, working in this customer-facing system. We're going to do quoting and order entry completely in our CRM system, but we'll push it over into our ERP system for fulfillment and invoicing. You need to make those decisions. Our bias is customer first, man. Why would you not run a customer first business and have your customer facing people using the customer facing system? But whatever your decision is, make one and be consistent about it, and then get the data synchronized 2 ways after that. And it's not necessarily trivial, right? There's a whole batch of reports and templates and things like that that you need to do to go through and understand at a granular level, what is the master system? What is our master data management policies and procedures to make all of this work? Okay, one moment. Just need to check my time here. Okay. All right, we're doing okay. User adoption. So this is where a lot of people start when they start to have problems with CRM. I think it actually comes much later in the process. First of all, notice I put user adoption in parentheses here, because in my experience, user adoption is the symptom, it's not the disease, right? People are going to want to do what they think is the best way to do their job in a business. If they're not adopting CRM, it's because they don't think CRM is the best way for them to get their job done. They might be wrong. It might be an education and training thing, but they might also be right, and it might actually be adding friction to the process. So look at user adoption as a symptom and take it seriously. So here's a few things to think about that are counterintuitive about user adoption. First of all, according to this study from the European Journal of Social Psychology, the average human being takes 66 days to change their behavior, to establish a new habit. Now, if you've kind of bought into the myth that I bought into not too many years ago, it was like, hey, somewhere between 4 weeks and 30 days was kind of like, for some reason, that was bandied about, like, oh, you want to start exercising? Well, do it consistently for 4 weeks, and now you got a habit and you can move on to the next thing. Or 30 days, right? About a month or something like that. Well, according to this article, nothing could be further from the truth. The average person takes 2 months, and notice some people take the better part of a year to change behaviors and to change habits. You've got to understand the pace of your people and the pace of all your people, right? You can't leave someone completely behind. You have to help bring along the slow adopters. You also have to figure out who are those fast movers who are going to do this in 18 days. Let's go ahead and help them move a little more quickly and not hold them back as much, and maybe they can help lead some of the others as part of your strategy. Now, the other thing we hear a lot is, okay, well, we want people to adopt CRM. Like, that's one new thing, right? Well, if you think about what you're really asking people to change when you're adopting something like CRM, it's something like, hey, maybe we've never tracked a pipeline before and we're tracking that now. And by the way, maybe you track your contacts in Outlook or in pencil and paper or on a notepad full of business cards or something like that. Now you need to track that here. And by the way, there's this Outlook integration with it that you need to learn. There's also this mobile app that you might want to learn. There's also maybe this way of tracking your activities that's different from anything we've ever done before. By the way, we have the searchable knowledge base in customer service we can go to do things. And don't even get me started on the learning curve for all the things marketing has to learn to understand a customer journey type of system. There are a lot of different things. So as a CRM implementation person, you might think, I just want you to add one more thing to your list. But you're really asking them to add 10, 11, 12, 15, 20 things to their list. And when you look at that research from Franklin Covey, you start to realize the more things you ask people to learn to do, the less things they're actually going to do. Your plan, your roadmap should actually include phasing this in over time. It is easy to deploy a lot of technology fast. It is not easy for humans to change that fast. So have a strategic plan to say, hey, you know what? Let's get started with accounts and contacts. Let's just get a Rolodex. Young people, that's a card file with a lot of contacts in it. Let's get a Rolodex up to date first. And now maybe let's start tracking some activities, or maybe let's move to opportunities next, or maybe let's do lead man. But don't do it all at once, right? Find little pieces, get that grafted in, take 2 or 3 months to get people fully trained, accountable to it, new metrics established, the data is clean, then move into the next thing, then move into the next thing after that. You need to break it up into small, digestible chunks. And when you think about planning for that, the secret to planning adoption is there's no planning for adoption. You will not be able to predict with exact metrics up front how long and what kind of work it will take to do adoption. So instead, create a flexible plan. Just look at it and go, look, we think we're going to need this many training sessions. We think we're going to need this much kind of communication. We think we're going to need these things. And sure, up front, we'll launch with a little bit of training because we need to do that. But then we're going to be sensitive to our users and listen to, wait, I didn't even think about that they might need training on this thing over here. Okay, we need to create some custom training for that. If you've already planned out 12 months of training, you're going to have a hard time with that rigid project plan responding to the needs of your users. But if you said, look, I've created this flexible, dynamic approach to making sure we drive adoption, and I've budgeted for it, whether it's an internal or external budget, I've budgeted for it, and now I can month over month look at what's happening and change the situation to respond to what's going on the ground instead of having to wait a full year to go by before I can change my plan. By then, people are so frustrated you're going to have other issues on your hands. Another thing to think about, and I'll build this one very quickly, is I talked about employee surveys, but employee surveys with a maximum effect are what we call behavior mining. There are certain questions you can ask, and they're very counterintuitive questions. They go all the way back to research against millions of data points that IBM started in the 1970s and has continued to this day that can predict the ability for an organization to manage behavior change. Change management, right? And you can break that down. The larger the organization you are, the more you can break that down by different segmented groups, localities, lines of business, whatever it is. And you can start to really get ahead of predicting who is going to change the most readily, who is going to have more obstacles, what are the things we can do to prepare for and clear away those obstacles. And the magic here is you need to do this at least once a year. We like to see it done at least twice a year if you're a decent sized company to make sure you're staying on top of it. And we've actually developed an entire app just for our employee surveying. It's called Adair. You can go to adair.app and you can check that out. We can even give you a free link to a demo version if you want to play around with some of the questions that are available in there. But the outputs of that are amazing, and they absolutely change behavior. We did some comparative studies with a client in Europe to show what happened with people who were listened to this way versus people who kind of followed a more traditional adoption path with, and it was unbelievable. We've got a whole separate session on that I'd love to deliver to you at some time. And then remember, again, people don't adopt all at once. So think about your resource allocation across different things over time, right? So as you start to do something new, routines are going to begin to destabilize, right? My old proven way of doing things, that's not going to work anymore. And now I've got new routines. But notice that my new routines aren't really hitting a stride until my old routines have decayed a lot. So my use probability kind of has this little dip, and that's where a lot of people fall off, right? It's like, hey, my old routines are falling apart, my new routines aren't doing so good, and now, let's give up because nothing's working right. You're gonna, as someone put it to me years ago, you're gonna go a little slower before you go faster. Build that in and resource accordingly, right? Here's the critical time when we need certain people doing certain things. One last thing is you've probably already got Microsoft 365 if you're thinking about Dynamics 365. Microsoft 365 has some great tools for setting up easy learning portals and stuff like that. So we set these up for our clients all the time, but you can take any site and you can kind of make it a learning portal of sorts with some light configuration. You can put learning resources in there, and then it becomes a nice, hot, linkable thing. There's a lot of other things you can do if you want to get more sophisticated with it, but don't lose that opportunity. You've already got the resource there. Avail yourself of that. If you want to use other more fancy things beyond that, by all means, please do so. But even if you do, don't walk past the learning portal. It's an unbelievable resource. It's easy for you to set up, and you've probably already paid for at least the licensing portion of it, more or less. Now, another area, number 6, that we see fall apart for CRM projects is document management. If you've ever worked with any CRM system, you probably know they're really not very good document management systems. That might make it easy to attach something, but things like editing in place, that doesn't work so well. Versioning, that doesn't work so well. Sharing with people outside of CRM, that doesn't work so well, right? So it's not really meant to be a document management system, especially when you expand it into all the other kinds of documents you really want to track when you think about a customer relationship. Well, the good news is you probably are already licensing a great document management system, Microsoft 365 with SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive, which is great. But your goal is you want to make it easy for your users to be able to find the documents they need, share them with everybody in one place. And what we see a lot of organizations fall down on is their document architecture, right? They're kind of like, oh, okay, good, set up the connection with SharePoint, and they kind of make a big mess. And look, if you've ever worked with a file share, and probably almost everybody has, you know that those are a headache, right? They become messy, and then you go to something like SharePoint to Microsoft 365 because you think, we have to solve this problem. And you solve some of the problems, maybe you've got some better cloud sharing and stuff like that, but the problem you probably don't solve is the architecture. You take this confusing file management approach, and SharePoint is either really good at improving that or really good at making it even worse than it already was. And a lot of organizations just kind of go, well, we're the CRM guys. We don't care about SharePoint. That's someone else's problem. We'll just kind of put that on autopilot. We're just going to focus on the Dynamics, the CRM system. And the problem is, over time, they find, I can't find my documents anymore. I've got duplicates everywhere. I've got version control issues. I'm making mistakes because I'm making decisions with clients based on information that's ROTI, if you remember that term. So really important that you get the collaboration part of this correct, and you get the architecture around how SharePoint and Teams is set up correctly. Along those lines also, think about sharing metrics. So one of the things we're very big on is something we created ourselves, but it's just an idea that anybody can implement, and that is, in CRM, track your squags, your small, quickly attainable goals, right? So, and that typically has something to do with your collaboration system. Again, SharePoint and Teams. So small, quickly attainable goals are things like, how many calls per day do we think we can do as a team? Because we know that drives results. Great, let's measure that, and let's put that out here, like in this case study for this client where they said, we've got a decentralized sales team. We want this visible. We want everyone talking about it, not just in the meetings, but being able to comment on it. So let's take the data, let's integrate with Power BI, let's put the Power BI data out in Microsoft Teams, and let's make it easy for people to see it and easy for people to comment on it so we can learn and grow and improve together. So another part of your information architecture. So that whole section is my long-winded way of saying your Microsoft 365 information architecture needs to be part of your Dynamics 365 plan, at least as much as that architecture relates to Dynamics. Maybe there's other parts of the business that you don't have permission to touch or whatever, but make sure your sales, marketing, customer service, and IT teams that support them do not lose sight of how important a component M365 is for effective D365 work. Okay. And our last one is this idea of, I call it care and feeding because it's such a broad topic. Support doesn't quite say what it needs to say. Maintenance doesn't quite say what it needs to say either. But this is a growing thing, right? When you plant your garden, when you dig the holes and put the seedlings in it for the first time, the easy part of the job is done, right? Now you've got to deal with the critters who are coming in there trying to eat what you're growing and the diseases that grow in there and the insects and all of that kind of stuff, the watering, the sun, the fertilizer, all of those kinds of things. You need to support and maintain that garden. Or put a different way, if you have a physical building, you have a maintenance plan for that building. Someone makes sure it's secure. Someone makes sure the entry systems work right. Someone fixes things when they break. Someone cleans things when they get dirty. You need a digital workplace maintenance plan, just like you need a physical workplace maintenance plan, whether it's something you own or something someone else owns for you. And it's got a cadence to it, right? There are certain things that need to happen daily, weekly, monthly, and so on. This is a quick list. I'll give you a more detailed list on the next page. But remember, this cadence is very important. It's support does not mean, oh, when something's broken, I need someone to call. That is the smallest part of the support plan. Support and maintenance means things don't break because we're taking care of. Remember I talked about master data management? You're proactively keeping that data clean. That's part of your support and maintenance plan. Clutter doesn't just mean the data inside the system. It means, wait a minute, users have created so many views that people are overwhelmed with all these views and it's slowing them down. I need to go maintain that and keep that clean. Adoption is falling off for this group. I need to monitor that and come up with a plan to make sure that we get that back on track with where it needs to go. Most organizations don't even know it's happening until it's a crisis. A support and maintenance plan helps you identify those things proactively and do something about them. So old school support, that's reactive. When you look at this plan for support, you can see proactive, 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 and the very bottom part there, reactive and project work, right? Now, project work doesn't mean big projects. You need some place to get the little things done that come up that don't fit into the scope of a big project. And reactive is that old school, I got to call somebody because I've got a problem. If you do this right, that happens less often because you're proactively addressing things before they become an issue. Okay, so wrapping things up with a few closing thoughts. There's our 7 habits. I'm not sure what just happened to that slide there, but I'll just read them. Let's do this. That one looks better. So there's our 7 habits. A few things to note about them. First of all, these are processes, right? We named them habits for a reason. They are not a thing you do once and then forget about them. They are habits. They're things that are processes. You do them again and again. They happen in a cadence. If they don't happen in the cadence, eventually they'll need to happen and it will force your hand, but it'll become a big crisis management type of project to get things back on track. I skidded across the surface of all these things. I've been talking fast and I haven't shared a fraction of what I would like to share with you on each of these 7 topics. So dive deeper. There's tons of downloadable resources. Hit me up at my email address. You'll see it in just a couple of slides. I get you the full deck with the links and you can go drill down into those. Remember this idea of a digital coach. Have somebody that's your trusted digital coach. Would we love to be your digital coach? Sure. It's what we do as part of C5 Insight day in and day out. But whether it's us or somebody else, according to Harvard Business Review, this is an absolutely critical part of your organization. You need that trusted person or group of people who've been there and done that 100 times before and can bring outside perspective to you to help you along on your journey. Because the world is changing fast, you need to stay on top of all of it. So remembering this, at the end of all this, habit has to do with support and maintenance. Your digital workplace needs that maintenance plan, just like your physical workplace does. All right, thank you everybody so much for coming today. I'm gonna call it done here in just a couple of minutes. Remember, if you want today's links, there's my email address. I'll send you the deck as a PDF. You can have all the links in there. That says business card. Sorry, I do this live also. If you're interested more in luck, we've got a couple of great books on Amazon about luck. One is called The Luck Principle by me. The other one is called Revenue Engineering by Tricia Desso-Cox. They're both great, simple reads. They're pretty easy to consume. In fact, we tried to make them so simple that even an executive can understand them. So hopefully they're a little bit more inspirational than just how-to nuts and bolts stuff, but they're a lot of fun to look at. consider engaging with C5 Insight, right? This is what we do as a business. So please reach out and contact us. We're like, I could really use a partner that helps us do these things. Hey, that's why we do these things all day long. So hopefully we added a lot of value, whether you want to work with us or not. But if you're looking for someone to help, that's what we're here to help you with. Reach out and connect with us. And by the way, not on this slide is something coming up, and that is something called the 365 Leadership Summit in the month of May. If you go to our website, you should be able to find the page with that. If I try to remember the shortcut link, it is gotluck.link/365 lead, I think, or it might be lead 365. Go check that out. If you like this kind of content, we're going to have a day and a half of nothing but this kind of content. It's not about the how to do cool things inside of CRM with configuration. That's a separate thing that actually just precedes it, called DynamicsCon Live. We're going to focus on these really important leadership types of topics. We hope to see you there. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great day, and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.